What if the most powerful thing about you had nothing to do with what you said, and everything to do with what people felt the moment you walked into a room? There is a kind of person who doesn't need to announce themselves. They don't arrive loudly. They don't demand attention or perform confidence or fill every silence with the nervous energy of someone who needs to be noticed. They simply walk in, and something shifts. The air changes. People sit up straighter without knowing why. Conversations adjust. Eyes move in their direction without being asked to. Nobody taught them a trick for this. Nobody handed them a script. What they have was built. Quietly. Deliberately. Every single morning, before the world had a chance to tell them who to be, they did something that most people will never do. They chose themselves first. Not arrogantly. Not selfishly. But with the kind of grounded, unhurried, absolute intentionality that, over time, through repetition, through the daily discipline of returning to themselves before engaging with anyone else, produced something that cannot be faked, cannot be bought, and cannot be taken. An aura. Not the mystical kind. The real kind. The kind built from self-mastery, from philosophical grounding, from the daily practice of becoming, incrementally, relentlessly, without fanfare, more fully and powerfully yourself. Today we are going to talk about how you build that. 7 Stoic truths. Applied every morning. Compounded over time. Until the person who walks into the room is someone that even you, the version of you sitting here right now, would feel in your bones. This is not motivation. This is architecture. Let's build. Stoic Truth 1, your morning is a declaration, not a routine. Most people treat their morning like a holding area. A foggy, half-conscious buffer between sleep and obligation. They move through it on autopilot, phone first, news second, coffee third, and arrive at their day having already absorbed 30 minutes of other people's emergencies, opinions, and agendas before they've had a single thought of their own. And then they wonder why they feel reactive all day. Why they feel behind before they've begun. Why the version of themselves that shows up to the world each morning feels like a diminished draft of who they actually are. Here is what the Stoics understood that most modern people have completely forgotten. The morning is not the beginning of your day. The morning is the creation of your day. Marcus Aurelius, who governed the most powerful empire on earth, who faced decisions daily that affected millions of lives, who operated under pressures that would have broken most human beings, began every single morning with what scholars now call his morning meditation. Before he was an emperor. Before he was a ruler. Before he was anyone's anything, he spent time becoming himself. Deliberately. On purpose. Rooted in his values and his philosophy and his understanding of who he intended to be that day. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous and surly." Not as a cynical statement, but as a preparation. A grounding. A way of saying, I know what is coming, and I have decided who I am in response to it. That is a declaration. The person with a ruthless aura does not discover who they are through the course of the day. They decide who they are before the day begins. And that decision, made in the quiet, in the stillness, in the private space of the morning before the world arrives, is what gives them the unshakable quality that other people feel and cannot explain. Your morning is your declaration. Not what you declare to anyone else. What you declare to yourself. Who are you today? What do you stand for today? What will move you, and what will not? Answer those questions before you answer anyone else's messages. That is where the aura begins. Stoic Truth 2, silence is the first language of power. There is a man I want you to think about. His name was Raymond, and he was, by every external measure, an ordinary man. Middle management. Average income. Nothing particularly remarkable about his resume or his background or his circumstances. But Raymond had something that made people consistently underestimate him at first and deeply respect him later. He had learned, through years of quiet practice, the art of not filling silence. In meetings, when tension rose and everyone rushed to speak, Raymond waited. When someone said something provocative, designed to produce a reaction, Raymond looked at them steadily and said nothing. When he was asked a question he didn't have an immediate answer to, he paused, visibly, unapologetically, and thought before he spoke. People found this deeply unsettling at first. They tried to interpret his silence as uncertainty, as weakness, as having nothing to say. Over time they understood something different entirely. Raymond's silence was not the silence of someone with nothing to offer. It was the silence of someone who had decided that their words were worth something, and would only be spent accordingly. The Stoics were obsessed with this. Epictetus wrote with striking directness, "Better to be silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt." But he meant something deeper than just avoiding foolishness. He meant that silence is the posture of someone who is not controlled by the social pressure to perform, who does not need to fill every space with the sound of their own voice in order to feel secure in their presence. Most people talk to manage their anxiety, to signal their intelligence, to avoid the discomfort of empty space in a conversation. And the moment you understand that about most people, you understand exactly why the person who doesn't do those things feels so different to be around. Silence communicates security. And security, genuine, unperformed, deeply rooted security, is the foundation of every powerful aura ever built. Practice silence. Not as a technique. As a truth. The truth that you do not need to prove yourself in every moment. That your presence is enough. That the words, when they come, will carry more weight precisely because you did not waste them on every available space. Let the silence work for you. It has been working for the most formidable people in history. Stoic Truth 3, how you do the small things is who you are. There is a principle embedded deep in Stoic philosophy that modern culture has almost entirely lost, and losing it has cost us more than we realize. The principle is this: character is not revealed in extraordinary moments. It is built in ordinary ones. Anyone can perform well when the stakes are high and the audience is watching. Anyone can summon focus, discipline, and intentionality when the outcome is obvious and the pressure is visible. That is not character. That is performance. And people, especially perceptive people, the kind whose respect actually means something, can always tell the difference. Character is what happens when no one is watching. It is how you make your bed when no one will see it. How you speak to the person who can do nothing for you. How you handle the small frustration, the minor inconvenience, the moment that will never be mentioned in any highlight reel. It is the discipline you bring to the tasks that no one applauds. The integrity you maintain in conversations that will never be repeated. These moments are not separate from your aura. They are your aura. Because the human nervous system is an extraordinarily sensitive instrument. People around you are picking up, constantly, beneath the level of conscious awareness, data about who you actually are. Not who you present yourself to be. Who you are. The consistency or inconsistency between your public performance and your private behavior registers in people's bodies before it registers in their minds. This is why some people feel trustworthy the moment you meet them. And why others, despite impressive credentials, polished presentation, all the right words, trigger a faint but unmistakable unease that you can't quite articulate. The feeling you get from a person is the sum of 1,000 small things they did when they thought nobody was measuring. A woman named Alara was one of the most respected figures in her industry, not because she had the most impressive title or the loudest presence, but because everyone who had ever worked near her, regardless of their position, reported the same experience. She treated the intern with the same genuine attention she gave the board. She arrived on time to meetings that didn't matter as much as the ones where she arrived on time to the ones that did. She did the unglamorous work with the same care she brought to the visible work. Nobody ever caught Alara performing. Because she wasn't performing. She was just, consistently, quietly, with no audience required, being exactly who she said she was. That is the most ruthless aura of all. Not the aura of someone who is impressive when they are trying to be impressive. The aura of someone who is the same person in every room. Build that. One small, unwitnessed, entirely intentional act at a time. Stoic Truth 4, control your body before the world tries to control your mind. Before we talk about philosophy, let's talk about physiology. Because the aura you carry into a room is not just a product of your mindset. It is a product of the physical instrument through which that mindset moves through the world. Your body. Your posture. Your breath. Your movement. The physical relationship you have with gravity and space and your own physical presence. The Stoics were deeply attentive to the body, not in the narcissistic, appearance-obsessed way that modern culture tends toward, but in the profoundly practical way of people who understood that the mind and body are not separate systems. What happens in one reverberates immediately in the other. When you move slowly, your nervous system registers safety. When you stand with your full height, your body produces hormones associated with confidence. When you breathe deeply and deliberately, your heart rate regulates, your thinking clarifies, your emotional responses become measured rather than reactive. These are not metaphors. These are mechanisms. The morning practice of the person building a ruthless aura begins, therefore, not with a thought, but with a physical choice. Move your body before the day moves you. This does not require a 2-hour gym session or a complex fitness protocol. What it requires is intention. 10 minutes of deliberate movement. A walk taken with actual presence, not while scrolling, not while listening to something, but simply walking, feeling the ground, inhabiting the body fully. Stretching that is actually felt rather than rushed through. Breath that is taken consciously rather than automatically. What you are doing in these moments, beneath the obvious physical benefit, is establishing command. You are beginning the day by choosing how your body feels rather than inheriting how your circumstances dictate it should feel. You are practicing, in the most fundamental possible way, the Stoic principle of taking ownership of what is in your control. And the body, how you inhabit it, how you move through space in it, how you breathe inside it, is in your control. A man who moves deliberately through a room communicates something before he opens his mouth. A woman who breathes slowly in a tense situation communicates something that no words could add to. The person who takes up their full physical space, not aggressively, not performatively, but naturally and without apology, communicates something that people receive in their nervous systems before their conscious minds have processed a single observation. Take control of your body first thing every morning. Not to look a certain way. To be a certain way, before the world has had a single opportunity to decide that. None of it is about what you say to other people. None of it is about impressing anyone. None of it is about performance or image management or the carefully constructed presentation of a self you think the world wants to see. Every single truth we have examined. These are the building blocks of an aura that no external circumstance can dismantle, because it was never built from external material. There is something that happens to a person who has been doing this work consistently. Not after years. Not after some distant, dramatic transformation that arrives one day like a lightning bolt and announces itself with fanfare. It happens quietly. Gradually. In the accumulation of mornings where they chose themselves first. In the stacking of small disciplines that nobody witnessed but everybody eventually felt. In the slow, patient, invisible process of becoming, one intentional day at a time, someone fundamentally different from the person they used to be. And then one ordinary day, in a meeting, in a conversation, in a moment that carries no particular significance, someone looks at them differently. Speaks to them differently. Responds to their presence with a quality of attention and respect that wasn't always there. And they understand, in that moment, what has been building. Not an image. Not a performance. Not a carefully maintained facade that requires constant effort to sustain. A self. Solid. Rooted. Unshakable in the way that only things built from the inside out can be unshakable. That is what the final 3 Stoic truths produce. And we are going to build them right now. Stoic Truth 5, suffering transforms into sovereignty when you stop running from it. Most people have a complicated relationship with difficulty. They tolerate it when they must. They avoid it when they can. They manage it, minimize it, medicate it, distract themselves from it, doing everything in their considerable human ingenuity to spend as little time as possible in genuine discomfort. And in doing so, they unknowingly forfeit the thing that difficulty, and only difficulty, can produce. Depth. There is a quality to people who have genuinely suffered and genuinely integrated that suffering, who have walked through the fire and come out the other side not destroyed but clarified, that cannot be manufactured by any other means. It is a quality of weight, of groundedness, of the particular kind of calm that belongs only to someone who has already faced their worst and discovered that they survived it. That quality is unmistakable. People feel it before they can name it. It is part of what constitutes a ruthless aura, not the aura of someone who has never been tested, but the aura of someone who has been tested completely and is still standing. The Stoics did not merely tolerate suffering. They actively engaged with it as a philosophical practice. Seneca wrote something that sounds almost provocative by modern standards: it is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult. He was pointing at something profound. The relationship between suffering and courage is not what most people think. Most people believe that courage is the absence of fear, the absence of pain, the absence of difficulty. The Stoics understood that courage is the decision to move toward difficulty, to engage with it fully, to extract everything it has to teach, rather than spending your life constructing elaborate detours around it. Let me tell you about a man named Marcus, not the emperor, but a carpenter I want you to imagine. Marcus lost his business at 44. Everything he had built over 20 years, gone. The financial loss was devastating. The identity loss was worse. He had defined himself entirely by what he built and what he owned, and when those things disappeared, he faced the most terrifying question a human being can face. Who am I when I have nothing? He could have numbed it. Could have filled the silence with busyness and distraction and the performance of recovery. Many people do. Instead, Marcus sat with it. 4 months. He let the difficulty be as difficult as it actually was. He stopped performing okayness. He engaged with the question honestly, uncomfortably, without the reassuring noise of constant activity. And in that engagement, in that willingness to stay in the fire rather than flee it, he found something he had never found in 20 years of external success. He found out who he actually was beneath everything he owned. When Marcus rebuilt, and he did rebuild, he rebuilt differently. With a groundedness that people around him felt immediately. With a clarity about what mattered and what didn't that made every decision he made carry a different quality of authority. He had not become successful again. He had become someone that success could not add to, and failure could not take from. That is sovereignty. And it is only available on the other side of difficulty that has been fully entered and honestly processed. Stop running from what is hard. The aura you are trying to build is waiting for you inside it. Stoic Truth 6, detachment is not distance. It is freedom. This truth is perhaps the most misunderstood of the 7. When people hear the word detachment, especially in the context of Stoic philosophy, they imagine a kind of emotional flatness. A gray, affectless existence in which nothing truly matters and no one truly reaches you. They imagine the person who has practiced detachment as someone who has simply stopped caring, and they rightfully resist that as a model for living. But that is not detachment. That is numbness. And numbness is the opposite of what we are building. Real detachment, Stoic detachment, the kind that produces genuine presence and genuine power, is something far more nuanced and far more beautiful than emotional disconnection. It is the ability to be fully present in an experience without being owned by it. To feel something completely, the joy, the fear, the love, the loss, without your entire sense of self being contingent on how that experience resolves. To engage with outcomes you desire without your inner stability depending on whether those outcomes materialize. To care deeply about people without your fundamental peace being held hostage to their choices, their moods, their approval or disapproval. This is what Marcus Aurelius was practicing when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He was not saying, don't feel anything about outside events. He was saying, do not allow outside events to be the governing authority of your interior world. There is a woman I want you to consider. Her name was Petra, and she was a senior leader in a large organization going through a period of significant uncertainty. Restructuring. Potential redundancies. The kind of organizational turbulence that sends most people into a sustained state of anxiety that contaminates their performance, their relationships, and their sleep. Petra's colleagues were watching her constantly, trying to read the situation in her face, in her body language, in the quality of her presence. Because that is what people do in uncertainty. They look for the most grounded person in the room and calibrate their own responses accordingly. What they found in Petra's face was not indifference. She cared deeply about the outcome. She was working with everything she had to influence it positively. What they found was the absence of panic. Not because she was certain everything would be fine, but because her sense of who she was, her values, her capability, her fundamental orientation toward her own life, was not located in the outcome of the restructuring. It was located inside herself. In a place that the restructuring simply could not reach. That is detachment. And the effect it had on the room, the stabilizing, almost gravitational effect of one person who was not being pulled by the current of anxiety that was pulling everyone else, was more powerful than any speech she could have given. Practice this every morning. Before you check what the world has decided about your circumstances overnight, spend time locating yourself. Your values. Your purpose. The things about who you are that are not contingent on any external outcome. Let those be your ground. And then engage with the world fully, passionately, with complete investment. From a place that the world cannot move. That is not distance. That is the deepest possible freedom. Stoic Truth 7, become the standard, not the approval seeker. And now we arrive at the seventh truth. The one that ties every other truth together. The one that is, at its core, the defining characteristic of every person who has ever possessed a genuinely ruthless aura. They stopped seeking approval. Not partially. Not selectively. Completely. Now, I want to be precise here, because this is a truth that is easy to misunderstand and easy to perform without actually embodying. Stopping the pursuit of approval does not mean becoming indifferent to feedback. It does not mean operating in an arrogant bubble where no external input is allowed in. It does not mean the kind of aggressive contrarianism that mistakes rudeness for independence. It means something quieter and something far more demanding than any of those things. It means becoming your own standard. It means developing, through the daily practice of self-examination that the Stoics called the evening review, through the honest reckoning with your own values and whether your actions have aligned with them, an internal measure of your own conduct that is more authoritative than anyone else's opinion of it. It means that when you make a decision, the primary question is not what will they think, but is this aligned with who I am and what I stand for? It means that when someone criticizes you, the response is not defensive anxiety or the collapse of self-doubt, but the genuine, honest question, is there truth in this that I should examine? If yes, examine it and adjust. If no, release it completely, without residue, without the lingering sting of someone else's assessment living rent-free in your interior. This is what Epictetus meant when he wrote, "Seek not the good in external things. Seek it in yourself." The approval of others is not a reliable standard. It shifts with their moods, their insecurities, their own unresolved histories. It is given generously when you are useful and withheld capriciously when you are inconvenient. Building your sense of self on it is like building a house on water. You will spend your entire life managing the instability rather than actually living. Let me tell you about a young woman named Adise. Adise grew up in an environment where approval was currency. Where the measure of a good decision was how many people endorsed it. where the fear of disapproval was so pervasive and so powerful that it functioned as the primary governing force of every significant choice she made. For 30 years, Adiz made decisions that looked right from the outside. That accumulated the nods and the validation and the "you're doing so well" from the people whose opinion she had decided mattered most. And at 31, sitting in a life that checked every external box and felt completely hollow, she asked herself a question she had never been taught to ask. What would I choose if no one was watching and no one would ever know? The answer that came was so different from the life she was living that it frightened her. But she followed it. Not overnight. Not without difficulty. Not without the discomfort of disappointing people who had grown comfortable with the version of her that existed to please them. But she followed it. And 3 years later, having built a life from the inside out, from her own standard rather than anyone else's measure, Adiz had something she had never had in 30 years of approval seeking. She had her own respect. And that, the respect of the person whose opinion you will live with every moment of every day for the rest of your life, is the only approval that was ever worth building toward. Become the standard. For your conduct. Your integrity. Your daily practice. Your morning declaration. The way you move through silence and difficulty and detachment and all the small, unwitnessed moments that are, as we have established, the actual substance of who you are. Become so grounded in that standard that approval from outside becomes a pleasant addition, not a necessary foundation. That is the aura. Fully built. Fully inhabited. Fully yours. The portrait, all 7 truths together. Let me bring you the full picture now. The person who walks into a room and shifts its atmosphere without trying, who carries the quality of presence that people feel before they understand it, is not mysterious. They are simply someone who has been doing this work. Every morning they declare themselves before the world has a chance to define them. They have made peace with silence, understanding it as the first language of genuine power. They bring the same integrity to the small moments that they bring to the significant ones, knowing that character is built in the ordinary, not revealed only in the extraordinary. They have claimed command of their physical presence, moving through the world with the deliberate, unhurried quality of someone who is not being chased by anything. They have entered their difficulty fully rather than fleeing it, and emerged with the sovereign depth that only the fire can produce. They have practiced detachment, not as emotional distance but as the radical freedom of someone whose inner world is not for rent. And they have become their own standard. Answerable first and finally to the measure they have set for themselves, and freed, by that accountability, from the exhausting, impossible, soul-diminishing task of managing what everyone else thinks. This is not a portrait of a perfect person. It is a portrait of a practicing person. Someone who returns to these truths every morning. Who fails at them sometimes and returns to them anyway. Who understands that the aura is not a destination to be arrived at but a direction to be maintained, one morning, one discipline, one honest reckoning at a time. That person is available to you. Not someday. Every morning that you choose to begin the way we have described today, you are becoming that person. The question is not whether you are capable of it. The question is whether you are willing to begin. The final word. You came into this conversation as someone who wanted to build something. Not an impression. Not a performance. Not the temporary, high-maintenance illusion of power that collapses the moment no one is watching. Something real. Something that lives in the bones. That breathes in the silence. That holds steady when the pressure comes, and it will come, because it was not built from circumstances that can be taken away. 7 Stoic truths. Applied every morning. Compounded without mercy over time. This is how the aura is built. Not in the moments when it is easy. In the mornings when it isn't. In the silence that feels uncomfortable before it feels powerful. In the small act of integrity that no one will ever applaud. In the decision to enter the difficulty rather than detour around it. In the practiced freedom of someone who has unhooked their peace from other people's approval. In those moments, unglamorous, unwitnessed, entirely yours, the most powerful version of you is being assembled. One morning at a time. Go build it. Subscribe to the Stoic Path. If these 7 truths landed in a way that felt less like motivation and more like a mirror, if something in this conversation showed you a version of yourself you know you are capable of becoming, then you already understand what the Stoic Path is about. This is not a channel that decorates your life with inspiration and sends you back to the same patterns unchanged. This is a channel that goes to the real places. The honest places. The places where philosophy stops being something you study and becomes something you live. Where ancient wisdom stops being historical and becomes the most practical tool you have ever been handed for navigating the actual complexity of your actual life. Every week, we come here and we build something together. Something that matters. Something that lasts. If that is what you are looking for, and something tells me it is, subscribe to the Stoic Path right now. Hit that button. Turn on your notifications. And share this with someone in your life who is ready to stop performing power and start building it from the inside out. They will thank you for it. And so will the version of themselves they are about to become. This is the Stoic Path. The ruthless aura is not given. It is built. Every single morning.